Next to take the oath of office is District 3 Council Member-elect Chris Wharton, whose oath will be administered by Justice Paige Peterson of the Utah Supreme Court. Chris will be accompanied by his husband, Chris Jensen. Would you three please join us up here on the landing?
All right, will you please raise your right hand? I, Christopher Wharton, do solemnly affirm
I, Christopher Wharton, do solemnly affirm
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge the duties
and that I will discharge the duties
of my office with fidelity.
of my office with fidelity. Thank you again. Thank you, Stan, and thank you for your service to District 3 and to the people of Salt Lake. Standing before you today on the steps of this beautiful building, I'm humbled and inspired. For me, community service has always been a calling, and to have earned the support of my community in return is something that I will always hold near and dear to my heart. Thank you to my thoughtful and loving husband, Chris, for always encouraging me while also keeping me grounded. Thank you to my parents, Tom and Cindy, and my extended parents, Grandma Janet and Rick, for always believing in me even when I doubted myself. I want to thank my grandparents, Tom Sr. and Pat, who are no longer with us, but whose sense of civic duty continues to shape who I am today. To the rest of my family, especially my most ardent and outspoken supporter, Karen, thank you for being my safety net and for always being there whenever and wherever I needed you. Because pets are a big deal in District 3, I also want to thank Blanche the Corgi and my cats, Tim Gunn and Ferguson, for being my only loved ones who couldn't care less about the campaign. I'm grateful to my network of loyal friends who donated, hosted parties, made calls, and walked door to door because they know my passion for Salt Lake City is contagious. Thank you to the other leaders and public officials in the community who lent your credibility to my name. Many of you are here today. I also want to thank my campaign team, Ryan LeRae and John Catan, and everyone at Grassroots Utah, for focusing me on the right things, making sure we all had the facts, and staying confident in our message. Finally, thank you to the residents of District 3 for being so enthusiastic and engaged in this election, and for trusting me to be your voice on the City Council. As we gather here today, speaking of the future of our city and the challenges we face, I can't help but reflect on our past. From its founding, Salt Lake City has been truly unique. Established by Mormon pioneers seeking religious liberty, the earliest permanent settlers sought to create a model society. And while this may be the dominant story of our city's history, it is certainly not the only one. Before the pioneers, there were other missionaries and explorers captivated by the beauty of our natural surroundings. Before them, there were indigenous tribes who inhabited this land for generations. Shortly after the pioneers arrived, other groups made their way into the valley, bringing their own backgrounds and perspectives, and creating the strong counterculture that continues to set Salt Lake City apart. In fact, the story of this city is one of give and take, of people from very different, even conflicting backgrounds, with different beliefs, cultures, and dreams for the future. Despite those differences, clashes have given way to compromise and collaboration. Polarization has given way to progress. And the challenges facing our city are not so different from those we've faced in the past. Take public transit. Between 1872 and 1892, the city expanded transportation from mule-pulled wagons to a fleet of electric streetcars covering 42 miles of track. Today, with the adoption of the first Transit Master Plan, we must find a way to implement more routes, more frequent stops, and more railways to move people around more efficiently and in greater numbers. At the turn of the last century, when streets and public amenities were stretched too thin, numerous civic leagues, most notably the Salt Lake Council of Women, worked with the city to improve parks, libraries, and thoroughfares. With the help of churches and charity groups, the city even coordinated unemployment committees to shelter and care for those in need. Today, we must continue to forge public-private partnerships to improve the quality of life for residents with complete streets, accessible public lands, and vibrant arts programs. We must continue to provide resources and safe spaces for our most vulnerable populations, like children from low-income families, refugees, undocumented immigrants, and people experiencing homelessness. We've faced population surges and housing shortages. We've faced economic booms and downturns, changing industries and demographic shifts. Even clean air is something that we have overcome before. In 1908, Salt Lake City leaders championed efforts to reduce smoke pollution across the valley, an effort that continued into the 1920s. Once again, air quality represents the greatest threat to our environmental sustainability, and we must find new measures and build new coalitions to turn the tide of toxic air. These are just a few of the important issues the Salt Lake City Council will face over the coming years. As complicated and intimidating and novel as these problems may seem, we must not forget that we have faced these tasks before in some form. We've learned our city does best when all sides come together to move forward. That's how a city founded by a small religious minority became one of America's top refugee relocation cities. It's how an old Western town became one of the best cities for millennials and young professionals. It's how a locality built on mining evolved to be one of the greenest cities in the country. And how, despite being in one of the reddest states, we have one of the highest queer and transgender populations in the nation. Frankly, it's how someone like me, a liberal, gay millennial, sixth-generation Utahn, can represent the district that includes Temple Square, the Utah Capitol, and the two oldest, most established neighborhoods in the state. It's our ability to be the place where different sides come together, not simply to coexist, but to thrive. Today, as we begin our work as the youngest city council in Salt Lake City's history, our charge is as old as the city itself: to lead the people of Salt Lake, and indeed the people of Utah, forward. To form a capital city that is known for our unique identity, innovation, and inclusiveness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Wharton, Chris, and Justice Peterson. So you may take your seat and stand. Thank you very, very much for your service.